Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you're doing well. We are about to embark upon one of the strangest stories I've heard come out of the underground in a while. And when I say the underground, I mean like the deepest, darkest, most abrasive and obscure underbelly of it. Not like your favorite rapper who has 2 million monthly Spotify listeners or your favorite indie artist who has a spread in the New York Times. No, I'm talking about the deep, dark rabbit hole of the experimental, noise, and avant-garde scene, which again is where this story comes from. But my gateway to this tale came by way of, I guess you could say, one of the more popular acts to operate in that space, and that is Shushu. Now, Shushu, if you are unaware, I think is one of the best modern music acts out there. The quality of their decades-long and versatile discography speaks for itself. For a bulk of the band's existence, it has been helmed by multi-instrumentalist producers, songwriters Jamie Stewart and Angela Sio, and they stand as one of the rare examples of a music act that has genuinely made some of the most freaky and horrific music you can possibly put your ears on, but have also released and created records that have a much wider appeal as well, and a lot of crossover into the indie scene. And as a result, Shushu has built up a level of fandom and critical acclaim that is not often allotted to groups that make music as experimental and harsh as theirs. So again, they operate in a very unique space and context, which is why occasionally the band will perform some pretty obscure bills where they are performing alongside artists who also share similar experimental and noise bona fides. But I guess recently this has put Shushu in proximity of a music act known as African Imperial Wizard. And after their experience performing on this bill with African Imperial Wizard, Shushu took to Instagram to post this story claiming African Imperial Wizard is in fact a white guy. Now, if you're uninitiated like I was, you may be wondering like, what significance does that hold? Well, for one, I guess the guy who stands in to perform as African Imperial Wizard when there is a live performance, yeah, I guess he hides his identity using this top to bottom patterned Ku Klux Klan robe, which that in and of itself is odd enough. But also, I guess there's a whole lengthy backstory behind this project where it's said that African Imperial Wizard is in fact a music collective hailing from Angola. And some of the background posts explaining the project read pretty dramatic. African Imperial Wizard was secretly founded in the northern districts of the old low town of Luanda the day after the ceasefire between the government of the Popular Liberation Front of Angola and the rebels of the National Union for Independence was signed. The music producers immediately focused on the struggle against the colonial military oppression, the pillage of a tyrannized people turned into slaves for centuries, and the vengeance of a young generation in perdition. They planned on conveying their actions with ethnic moods drowned in violent, powerful beats directed under a martial symphony. African Imperial Wizard symbolizes the expression of the discomfort left by the ashes of the longest civil war known in Africa, fed by deep and profound social, cultural, and regional divisions within the Angolan society. It goes on, and there are numerous posts like this, again, further explaining the project or contextualizing certain African Imperial Wizard releases, though what's kind of funny is more recent posts kind of explaining the project's output are a little bit more different in tone as far as the writing, like feature a lot more AAVE and are like a bit more punchy and hip linguistically. So yeah, given all of that, maybe you sort of understand where I'm coming from in terms of like this being a little concerning, because if what Shushu is saying here is true, we not only have a white experimental musician who is, parading around on stage in a KKK robe, but is also pretending to be a collective of musicians from Angola who survived the longest running African civil war in history, which is fucking crazy, but also honestly not that surprising when you actually go listen to some of African Imperial Wizard's music, because I swear to you, it sounds like a white guy made it. I don't know if Austen's gonna grab a clip here to play, but I'll try to paint a picture. Like, it just kind of sounds like a white European guy who heard a bunch of African head charge. Does chat know what African head charge is? Please let me know in the comments. Yeah, European white guy, heard some African head charge records, but he's also really into industrial noise. And his horrendous idea with like kind of marrying those two influences is essentially sample a bunch of African drum patterns and passages, put a bunch of harsh and horrifying noise on top of them, throw a few chants in there for good measure, and oh, of course, because there's like, a Civil War background to all of this, machine gun fire. It basically sounds like the experimental musical equivalent of a white guy doing a documentary, a very salacious documentary about the Angolan Civil War in like a battlefield porn kind of way. But aside from like the weirdly distasteful tone of African Imperial Wizard's music, I guess another pretty obvious tell is that there's not really anything inherently African about the musical ideas on these records outside of the sounds and musical passages that are sampled into it. Like, from what I've heard, there seem to be no original musical ideas expressed or created by the African Imperial Wizard main brain that would signal to me they spent their lives steeped in music coming from the Angolan music scene. Like, again, compositionally and aesthetically, the projects African Imperial Wizard has released so far seem much more influenced by European experimental noise music and industrial music. And while it is true there are all sorts of people from all across the world who are into all sorts of music, I mean, there's a whole mini Vice documentary about these indigenous Australians who are really into fucking heavy metal music. But the story of a bunch of survivors from war-torn Angola being pissed off about the civil war they had sort of like grown up in and channeling their rage over that civil war through European modes of noise music just doesn't make the most sense. I mean, if you keep running the mankind simulation here over and over and over, I suppose it may happen eventually, but like the likelihood does not seem high. And, if it were happening, one would think there would be like some quality original Angolan musicianship and instrumentation going on in these mixes, but often there's like not. It's just like weird noise and beats and samples. I also want to point out that there has been speculation that the African Imperial Wizard is actually not from Angola at all, that has been circling around the internet for a minute now. So it's not like what Shushu is saying here is altogether new in terms of speculation, but being longtime members of the experimental scene and, also on top of that, putting their reputations on the line to get this information out there, because I imagine if what Jamie and company were posting here was not true, like that would be even crazier than the original story itself. Like, why would they just post this insane accusation? I'm not sure. But yeah, again, the speculation itself is not altogether new, but we do have a bit of confirmation here from one of the most trusted names in the scene out there. On top of that, I'll say, let's use this story as a learning experience here, because, it's been a while since we've had a good sensible conversation around the appropriation topic, something that Shushu itself has even been caught in the middle of, given the origin of the band name, some of the topics and subject matters of past songs too.
Without making a big deal about it, we said, okay, on future releases, I would like it if that song was not on that record. Not because I don't feel like I want to censor myself, but like I said, the point of doing that song was not to make anybody feel bad. And the journalist I had talked to said that she was a big Shushu fan. She's black, and she said when that song came on, the band became very unsteady feeling for her. She said she kind of knew where we were coming from it, but it just didn't feel right. The point of that song was not to make people not feel right. The point of the song was to ask questions. If the point of that song was to make people not feel right, then we would leave it. So I still feel very free to talk about whatever I would want to talk about, but reality changes, and the context in which those things are discussed, because I want to be a feeling and humane person, also needs to evolve. I don't feel constrained by that at all. I mean, I don't think that that's a constraint. I think it's just the way things are. And if I want to care about people's feelings, and the point for us is to make music for other people to feel something from, we want to be cognizant of how those types of ideas are brought across.
And I think when it comes to creating art, as long as it's being done tastefully and respectfully, it's totally fine to be inspired by and borrow musical or artistic ideas from other cultures or backgrounds or points of view that are not your own. However, we are most definitely going overboard when we are writing insane fanfic about ourselves and telling lies to our audiences about who we are and where we're from and what civil wars we may or may not have suffered through. But you know what? One surefire way to avoid some of these pitfalls is to, when you are creating things and putting yourself out there, be yourself. And for now, I think I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think about all of this madness in the comments. I'm sure you will. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, forever.